What is going on, guys? Matt O'Leary here with another video. For today, I want to get into the New York Jets offensive line and what the hell can they do to try to get this thing going in the right direction, because it was an absolutely putrid performance against the Dallas Cowboys in week 2, and it wasn't a particularly great showing in week 1 against the Buffalo Bills. We're going to talk through pretty much every single guy on the offensive line, just because I think it's worth note, and we'll, say who's been playing well, who hasn't been playing well, can the Jets make a change there, who could come in, all different kinds of things. And I get it, like they went up against two really, really good defenses, and they probably won't go against a defense that is as tough as the Dallas Cowboys. So don't want to completely overreact and, make declarative statements after 2 games, but it is a little bit worrisome for some of these guys, and just, again, the state of the line so far. So we'll start left to right. We'll go with Dwayne Brown, who really struggled against the Dallas Cowboys. 4 pressures allowed, 1 sack, 2 hits, a hurry, and a penalty as well. Dwayne Brown was pretty much tasked with Micah Parsons one-on-one, which does not really make a lot of sense, and the Jets offensive line struggled to pick up a stunt, which is nothing really all that new. But this wasn't really a new thing for Dwayne Brown. He struggled against the Buffalo Bills, and he's missed a lot of time. Like, he missed pretty much the entirety of training camp. He didn't play in a preseason game. Comes in the last couple of weeks as a ramp-up period. Plays in week 1, not great. Plays in week 2, worse. Now, again, want to mention and reiterate that how good this Dallas Cowboys defense is and how good Micah Parsons is. Like, I know all of these things play a factor in it, but how long of a leash does he get at now 38 years old? He is an old veteran left tackle who wasn't great last year, although he played through an injury. He was fine. He was okay last year, but he's playing through an injury, gets the surgery, comes back, doesn't have a lot of time, doesn't get a lot of reps as a unit, and doesn't look good so far through the first 3 games. So I don't really think that, like, at this moment, right now, you could possibly make that switch and take Dwayne Brown out. I think your best case is that you are hoping that the more he plays, the more he gets in gear and the more he starts to get going a little bit. Because they don't really have a ton of other choices. Like, what's the alternative? You're going to put Billy Turner in or Max Mitchell in, both guys who struggled heavily in the preseason and in training camp. I don't really see that one as a likely alternative for the Jets to go, you know what? We're going to pull the cord on Dwayne Brown after, a handful of games, and we're going to go into Max Mitchell, or we're going to go into Billy Turner. Now, could they potentially move Mekhi Becton over there? They could switch his side, and we'll get to, Mekhi Becton in a little bit, but he has expressed that he wants to play on the left side of the offensive line more often than not. Like, he's more comfortable on that left side. He's spent a lot of the offseason or in training camp working on the left side of the offensive line. So maybe that is your alternative. You move Mekhi Becton to the left side, but he hasn't been like downright dominant where you're like, oh my God, he needs to go in and play on the left side. Or theoretically, you could play AVT anywhere. So we're going to talk a ton about AVT in this video. But he played a game at left tackle against I almost said the Dallas Cowboys, against the Pittsburgh Steelers last year in, week 4 of the NFL season. And he played a lot of right tackle last year as well. But just with Dwayne Brown, it hasn't been good. The left side of the offensive line, to me, is more of where my concern lies with this team. Dwayne Brown, with the age, is going to get a lot of criticism and not as long of a leash from at least the fan base, because he was pretty much gift wrapped that starting offensive line job. And I get it. He's a veteran. He wanted to come back and wanted to play, but his play hasn't necessarily dictated that he's earned that job. That could change, obviously, but hasn't looked good so far early on in the season. Then there's Laken Tomlinson, who tough free agent signing. Didn't look good last year. You're hoping for a rebound season. Hasn't really looked good. 2 pressures allowed. He got better as a run blocker, I thought, last week. But just overall, you're looking at a 19-game sample size of this guy just not being very good. Like, he was a Pro Bowler with the San Francisco 49ers a couple years ago. Jets pay him pretty big money. He comes in, Doesn't play well last year. Hasn't played well so far this year. It's frustrating. I really get the frustration with Laken Tomlinson. And, similarly to Dwayne Brown, the Jets can't really afford to be like, oh, well, this guy's, he's a veteran or he's making more money. He's going to get plugged in because of X, Y, and Z. They have to play the best 5 guys and get the best 5 guys out there. I don't care about what your draft status is. I don't care about how much you make. I don't care about any of that stuff. They need to play their best 5. So is it Laken Tomlinson sits and Joe Tippmann comes in? Because Joe Tippmann played left guard at times in the preseason and throughout training camp. He played both guard positions and center. So, he's a versatile piece. You spend a top 50 pick on him. Like, this is eventually he's going to come in and play. I just assumed that it would happen probably around the bye week, but that might be generous. He might have to come in, whether it's for Laken Tomlinson or this next guy that we're going to get into in Connor McGovern, who had maybe his worst game as a Jet, was really, really, really bad. 5 pressures, 4 hurries, and a sack allowed in this game for Connor McGovern. So does Joe Tippmann come in for McGovern, or is he coming in for Laken Tomlinson? Because I think sooner rather than later, they're going to have to make some sort of change. And it wasn't just, the numbers, the stats that looked bad for Connor McGovern. Like, it lined up, the film lined up with it too, which is just, it's frustrating. He was brought back in at very cheap money, so I don't think they would really necessarily mind to make that switch at center. And I think this shouldn't play, again, this probably should not play a factor, but part of me really feels like they would move McGovern out for Joe Tippmann first before they would with Laken Tomlinson, because Tomlinson's the high price point free agent signing, where McGovern is back on, pennies on the dollar. They basically paid him, backup money to return. And, I think you could make a case for Joe coming in to play either of those 2 spots. His natural position is center. The Jets want him to be the center of the future. I would imagine that's where he would come in, but yeah, we're on Joe Tippmann watch. Whether it's at guard or center, Joe Tippmann watch is officially on. Would not expect them to make a change this week going into this game. I feel like that would be just a quick hook, and this coaching staff has been slow, especially with their veterans, to make that kind of a move. But if these guys go out there and struggle again for a 3rd week in a row, it might be some serious time to discuss what other alternatives are. Then there's AVT, who, like, no sugarcoat, he did not play well against the Dallas Cowboys. Their entire offensive line did not play well. He had 5 pressures and a sack allowed, but AVT is the guy that I'm least worried about on this team. The question is just, what do you do with him? Do you leave him at right guard and just let him get comfortable there? Because that's, really where he was plugged in to start last year. That's where he's plugged in to start this year. He can play left guard. He can play left tackle. He can play right tackle. He's played 4 positions since he's been in the league. This is now his 3rd year in the league, and has been a very, very versatile piece. And you have the luxury, I guess, with AVT, where if push comes to shove, you can move him outside to tackle. He's probably best suited in the NFL as a guard. But if things are really, really bad and they don't really have another alternative, would you rather turn to Billy Turner or Max Mitchell, or move AVT out, get Joe Tippmann in there, or Wes Schweitzer in there potentially as well? I might rather do that, just because, I have more faith in AVT as an overall offensive lineman than I do with either Billy Turner or Max Mitchell there. And the last guy is Mekhi Becton, who 3 pressures and 3 penalties. To me, the penalties has been a bigger issue. A couple of false starts. It's just, they got to get him in gear. They didn't really run the ball to the right side of the offensive line, and maybe that's a video for another day, just talking about what Nathaniel Hackett could do differently going into this week against the New England Patriots, because they have 2 guys who are your better run blockers in AVT and Mekhi Becton, and they pretty much exclusively ran the ball to the left side, and they didn't utilize their tight ends and in the run game nearly enough as blockers. So again, probably more on that at another time, but Mekhi Becton has to cut down on the penalties. He is what he is at this point. I don't think you could take him out. I'm not convinced that either Max Mitchell or Billy Turner would be a better option than Mekhi Becton. I guess the only question for me is if they have the stones to move Mekhi Becton back to left tackle. I think something pretty catastrophic would have to happen, where you would need like another really brutal week from Dwayne Brown for them to make that kind of a change. But the moral of the story is the Jets have to do something here, or they need these guys to wake the F up and wake the F up now. Brown, Tomlinson, McGovern, AVT, Becton. That was the planned starting five, at least to begin the year. I would be absolutely floored if that's how the offensive line looks at the end of the year. I think Joe Tippmann works his way in there, and I wouldn't be surprised if we see even another switch. Who that is, still TBD, right? Like, it could they swap out Dwayne Brown? I guess they could, but I think they would be more likely to try to wait that one out and get that one to click. I don't know what they do, but I want to hear, what would your 5 offensive linemen be from left to right? How would you go about fixing this? Do you continue to run Brown, Tomlinson, McGovern, AVT, and Becton? I think this is my last week of that. I would be surprised if they made a change now, but this is the last straw. It's put up or shut up time for this offensive line unit, and if they have another bad week, I'm making some changes going into week 4. On what is a little bit of a longer week, right? Because you play on Sunday Night Football, so you get an extra couple hours of practice time. How about that? That's going to do it for me on this video. Thank you so much for tuning in. Once again, I'm Matt O'Leary, and I'll catch you next time.